Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Council of Juvenile Correctional Administrators Positive Youth Development Committee's Education Webinar Series. This is our second of several webinars this year focused on education and juvenile justice systems. Today's webinar focuses on classroom excellence and secure residential facilities. I want to thank you all for taking the time to participate in this webinar series today. For those of you who might be new to CJCA, we are a national nonprofit organization formed in 1994 to improve juvenile justice systems, local secure correctional and residential facilities, services, programs, and most importantly, long-term outcomes for youth and their families. CJCA represents the youth juvenile justice system CEOs in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and various major metropolitan counties across the country. Thank you again for joining us today, and I will now turn it over to Jonah, who's with the CJCA Help Desk, to provide a few housekeeping items.
Thank you, Mike. Before we get started here, just a couple of quick housekeeping things. All attendees will be muted for this call. There are a lot of you, so we're just going to have the presenters speak. You can type questions at any time into the GoToWebinar control panel. And at the end of the session, we will have a Q&A, and all your questions will be reached at that time. This webinar is also being recorded. A link to the audio recording and a PowerPoint presentation will be sent following the webinar. And now I will turn it over to Peter Forbes.
So good afternoon. My name is Peter Forbes. I'm chairing the Positive Youth Outcome Committee for CJCA. I'm also the commissioner for the Department of Youth Services here in Massachusetts. I'm just going to really do a quick recognition and then a handoff. So I want to thank Mike Dempsey and the team at CJCA. I want to recognize Phil Harris, who's a retired professor out of Temple University, long-term associate and consultant of CJCA. He's the person that actually had the original idea to put together an educational series. Simone Gulf from the American Institute of Research, who's been on an ad hoc planning committee with myself and Michelle Phillips here from Massachusetts. Our keynote today, our presenter today is David Domenici. He is the executive director for the Center for Educational Excellence in Alternative Settings. He's the founding principal of the Maya Angelou Academy at Washington, D.C.'s long-term juvenile justice facility, which is where David originally, from my perspective, really distinguished himself nationally with his work there. He's currently operating, his organization with David's guidance is currently operating the Travis Hill schools, which are juvenile, one is in a juvenile detention center and another is in an adult jail in the New Orleans area. David is a leader in juvenile correctional education and has agreed to offer his time and share his insight into his work. So I'm going to go right to David and ask him to take it over.
Okay, thanks, Peter. And thanks, everybody. I'm just going to, make sure we get our technology going here. And let's see, is everybody seeing my screen now?
Yes, we can see it. Yes, we can.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I realized. Okay. Hey, everybody, this is David Domenici. I'm excited to be with you all. I want to thank Peter and everybody else for putting this together. And I really want to thank all of you that are on the call and others who are not, who've been working so hard over the last 5 to 10 years to really make the reform efforts inside of youth correctional facilities start to incorporate really reforming and improving the quality of education as a part of that reform effort. I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm happy to try to just share a few tidbits from the field today. I'm on the first slide here. We broke this into 2 sections. The first section might take 20 to 30 minutes. The next one, hopefully just 5 or 10. And then want to make sure we leave time for questions. And I'd say, Simone, if it ends up that I'm running a little late, let's just sort of beat me and tell me no matter what to get through the last set of slides. I did want to let people know, I think this webinar could be helpful to just about anybody interested in doing this work. I do know that originally the first part of this in particular is aimed a little bit more at people in executive leadership at the state or county level. Those of you who may not oftentimes get into your schools and who might feel like, hey, I don't know, given my position, sort of what to do or how to think about whether the schools are high quality. So the first part of this is a little bit more aimed at that group of individuals. And I'm just going to go ahead and get started there. So that's, again, the two different parts of the program that we're going to try to do today. The first is just sort of asking some good questions. The second would be sort of 7 steps to follow, and then we'll try to do some questions. So let's go to the first one. The first one, again, I kind of have this sort of how the heck would I know what to look for, what to ask if I was the director, the deputy director. I had the pleasure of working with Mike Dempsey, Peter Forbes, and a number of people. But if I was in that position and I didn't get into my schools a lot, or if I wasn't a former principal or teacher, how do I even know if my schools are any good and my classrooms are doing what I think they should be doing for students? And that's what I want to try to cover here first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest to you that you just start by asking some good questions and putting some basic systems in place. And again, don't get bogged down at all in whether you believe you're an education expert or not an education expert. Many of us have had children that have gone to school. You've been inside of these facilities. So let's start asking some good questions, and let's probe deeply and at a real detailed level, just like you do in so many other ways, to figure out how things are going inside of your big agencies. So, okay, my first question, hey, does everybody go to school every day? That seems obvious. What we've found is that many times everybody thinks that everybody goes to school every day, but in reality, a lot of kids don't end up going to school. And what we've tried to do is work hard with agency leadership, school leadership, to really start to get down to the nitty gritty. What makes, our kids in school or not, our kids not in school? And I'm going to recommend that for those of you in leadership that if you don't, that you try to put some tools in place that would really help on this. You probably get a population count every day. You probably get a lot of things like that. You know who's in your facility or facilities, but do you really know how many of them actually get up, get into school, and get to school on time and are there the entire day? And I'm also going to suggest that you try to put some goals in place. 90% of the students in school on time, fully there. What did I find when I worked at my academy, and what do we work on now that we're down in New Orleans a lot? We find that a lot of this is really operational stuff. We find that, like, there's a backlog. The breakfast gets served late, so kids come chronic. So a certain group of kids, the last group to breakfast always comes late. We find that, like, the medical staff isn't asked to come in before school starts, so students come into school. They're there for 15 minutes, and then they start getting pulled out of school all morning long, disrupting everybody's attempt to sort of make school really have meaning. We find potentially that things like meeting with probation officers or attorneys, all of which are really necessary, aren't orchestrated in ways that really help make school be something that can really be meaningful. Working in these facilities is challenging. There's a lot of operational, there's a lot of interruption that we can't fix. So what I'm suggesting is, as a leader, you want to help your principal address as much as that as possible, because that allows your principal to then support and hold her or his teachers accountable for really doing right by your students. What could you do on this front? Well, here's what we do. I think that's up. So this is a real little we just do this every day. We use a Google form and it prints out this PDF. School's supposed to start at 8:40. Here's the units, the time they arrived. We have 46 students in the facility. 41 of them came to school on time. There's the arrival times. Any student that's not there, we put their name down on the reason why they are not there. But most importantly, I believe, is that document then serves as and that document goes out to a lot of people. Let's put it that way. And that document is intended to start helping people have conversations. Why isn't Kenny in school for 3 days straight? Why is that unit or that pod or that tier coming late? Those are the sort of conversations that we want people to have on a regular basis, so you can triage this down. And again, I don't want to get too stuck on any of this, but all these documents are available. These samples are available if people are interested. But again, if I'm an agency director or a fairly senior person, I want to know, is everybody really making it to school? Are they making it on time? And if they're not, how can we work together? Again, is it breakfast? Is it people getting dressed? Is it secure care staff in a certain unit tends to have arrival time challenges? What's the operational log jam? I want all students in school on time, and I want to really start to focus on that small handful that don't get in, and we can get back to that in a moment. Okay, next question I'd suggest we ask, is the school fully staffed? What does teacher attendance look like? Are your human resource policies sort of really helping you, or are they hindering you? The same thing here, we may not look at all these, but it's really critical. There's a lot of research out there about the difficulty in staffing schools and youth correctional facilities. You want full-time teachers in your classrooms as much as possible, to the extent that your schools may have chronic attendance problems, if they're having to use substitute teachers a lot, if they have other people on staff that are often substituting. It's really hard to run good schools when there's a lot of teacher churn and when you don't have full-time teachers there ready to teach every single day. And again, some of this might sound kind of like, oh, wow, that's sort of basic 101. But one of the surprises in a traditional school system, 15% teacher absenteeism is considered chronic, and there's significant research that says that has really detrimental outcomes for students. In many of the facilities where we've had a chance to work, we really worked hard with people to focus on this and really try to help them get their arms around it. What are the challenges? Can they get someone to school every day? Is this a rural school district that has salary challenges? Is this what's really helping or hindering us, our ability to get our teachers into our schools every day on time? The same thing, without overdoing this, here's the sort of data that you could be asking for. Are your classes taught by full-time teachers, or by substitutes, or by temporary teachers? And sometimes this happens for really good reasons. People are out at training people are in a training. We had a bunch of people go to a literacy conference last week. But even in a good week, you're trying hard. We're trying to get people trained. We're looking at PD. Even at a good week, we might not even in this case at one of our sites, we're still left with a fair amount of teachers out because we're trying hard to get teachers training. But if this happened for weeks on end, we need to start asking ourselves, how do we coordinate this in a way that it's not going to be detrimental to students? On this one, I want to just again point out things that I think are really critical, particularly about half of you on this call is my guess, if you're in leadership. Your agency itself runs the schools. That's the case in Indiana. That's the case in Oklahoma. That's the case in Nebraska. That's the case in upstate New York. In about half of your situations, you might be relying on a school district to run the school. I think no matter who's running the school, you as the director or deputy director of the agency or the education coordinator need to own teacher attendance. So what are some challenges here? Hiring cycles. If you run a juvenile justice agency and it takes you 4 to 6 months to go from recruiting to hiring to getting through your criminal background checks to onboarding, quite simply, you will not be able to run effective schools. And if that's how your system works, you need to work incredibly hard to go tackle that policy. I was just talking to Peter Leone early today about the work they've done in Illinois, where they've compressed and challenged and changed the way that teachers specifically get recruited, hired, screened, and trained in the Illinois system compared to how other people do. Because teachers look for jobs in the spring, and good teachers are out there in the spring looking for jobs. And if you interview them in the spring but don't give them a job offer till October, you've lost them. There's real challenges about whether teachers are on 12-month salaries or 10-month salaries. And again, this might really be in the minutia, but you want to be asking these sort of questions. If you run a juvenile justice agency and everybody works for the state government, what sort of calendar are my teachers on? If they're all on 12-month calendars, it's really hard to run professional development well. It's really hard to compete potentially in the local marketplace around salaries. So again, you want to be looking hard. What's creating those log jams? What's creating teacher absenteeism? In some places, again, in some big states, again, use a place like Illinois or even a place like Idaho now. The urban centers, like local school districts, have much higher salaries than in rural areas. Are you competing statewide at those salary levels? And if not, you need to try to figure out a way to do that. And if the answer is I work for a state government agency, everybody in the state has to earn the same amount. Again, my plea to you is to say, we got to move this up. We got to move this really high up into into our policy strategy. We have to work. We have to be able to compete regionally for teachers. That's how the marketplace works. We need to get exceptions. We need to work on that. How are our teachers evaluated? How are they trained? If you go to a school and you see what you believe is underperforming teachers, you got to be talking with that school district. You got to be talking with the school superintendents. What's going on with the staff that's in my school? I want high quality teachers, just like I know they have out there in the suburbs or they have at the school down the street. If you're the head of if it's a head of a school district you're talking to, you want to be having, I think, these really straight up conversations with them about how our students deserve the same quality of teachers as the students throughout your district. Okay, next thing I want to suggest that you ask for: do students get grades? Do they earn credits? Do they get report cards? Or are they in the appropriate classes? All this, again, I know it just sounds sort of technical and kind of minutia, but again, many of you know this. You've been a part of conversations before. You're in your own systems and you're struggling with this. There's a lot of research. Kids in juvenile justice facilities, do schools actually go get their transcripts? Do they try to get students in the right courses? Once the students are in the courses, do students get a regular report card? Do they get regular updates? Do their report cards get mailed home to their parents? They should. Does every student in your school have something that looks like a graduation plan where they have mapped out the courses they've taken, the courses they're enrolled in, and the courses they need to graduate? And again, if they don't, I want to be encouraging you as a leader to be talking with your school principal, either if that person works for you or if that person works for the local school district, to just ask, again, these really basic questions. These students deserve what every other student has in this school district, in this state. Students get report cards. Student gets progress reports. Parents get report cards mailed home. Do your schools have anything that looks like parent conferences? And if you're far away from parents, is there anything that's going on with teleconferencing or audio conferencing to help parents get a report card, talk with a teacher, be a part of a virtual gathering? At schools we work at, we really try to encourage them, try to have these parent days, try to have back to school nights. All of these things can happen in your schools. And if they don't, again, you as an agency director or deputy director are just kind of moving along here feeling like good things are happening. But 7-8 hours a day, students in your care, young people in your care, may not be getting what you think they're getting because you've sort of made an assumption that the school's off there doing well. So how would I do this? It's not like you're trying to catch anybody, but you're just trying to have real honest, transparent conversations. I would encourage you to go to the school, meet with the principal, pick 5 kids off the roster and say, right now, let's look at what we have on them. Do we have 5, for these 5 students, do they all have a class schedule? Do we have a transcript for each student? Do we have a graduation plan in place for each student? Is there a report card on file that the student got the last quarter? And then just ask some questions. Again, are things getting mailed home? How do you engage parents in the life of the school? So there's some basic things. I don't think it's worth clicking on the samples right now. All of them are going to be available. And then similarly, a really big one down here, E, what happens when students leave? This is where you can be a real advocate. There is a real struggle in many, many states that when students leave youth correctional facilities, they go to schools and schools refuse to accept their grades. Or student leaves halfway through a quarter and the school says, we're not going to accept those sort of like partial credits. You have to retake all those classes. Your school principal or your school district principal should be pounding the pavement on this, should be advocating for this. But again, we see this as a real role for agency leadership to take. If this were your kids and you now know about it, you got to go meet with the state superintendent of education, the superintendent of the local school district. We have a real school here. Our students are working hard. They're leaving, and they're going back out there to schools that are saying they're not accepting their credits. They're going back out there and being forced to go to alternative schools that are not the ones of their choosing. They're being forced to go to adult ed schools when they're only 16 years old. All this may seem like it's beyond the bounds of what you thought your job was. I'm just one person pleading for you to make it a part of your job. Your students need you. And all of these system challenges require all levels of advocacy. And when the commissioner of a juvenile justice agency starts to engage directly with the state office of education or directly with the superintendent of schools who runs the schools inside of them, it really changes the game for your principals and for your students. So I want to encourage you. And how would you know about this? Again, you know about this, I believe, because you get into the school, you start talking to your principals, and you start understanding the challenges that they face. Okay, I'm going to try to keep moving here. The next piece about this, I think it's really important, is to make sure that you have some understanding of your obligations as the custodial care provider for young people who are in your care who have special needs or have mental health diagnoses. If you're on this call and you're in leadership and you have not read or been briefed on the December 2014 sort of dear colleague letter from the Department of Justice and the Department of Education that talks about the responsibilities of the custodial care agencies for youth with special needs, well, you should. You need to read that letter. You need to get guidance from organizations like ours or some others about what does that look like and how do we comply with that letter in our facilities. Again, at a most basic level, the Department of Education and the Department of Justice have made it really clear, merely because a young person is in a youth correctional facility does not mean that IDEA protections no longer apply. When we worked with Mike Dempsey in Indiana, I mean, we've worked with some states that have done so much work around this because leadership proactively said, we want to tackle this. We want to change the way, we want to move away from punitive discipline practices. We want to make our schools and our facilities places where young people with disabilities and mental health challenges can succeed. It takes an immense amount of work, but when leadership decides they're going to make this happen with the right work and the right support, you can really make huge differences in the lives of young people. But what's most important, I think, again, out of the leadership space, is you have to know, and your facilities directors need to know, that this notion that because a young person is in custodial care, that IDEA may not apply is just patently false. The principles of IDEA apply 24/7 to young people in youth facilities. They don't apply only when the young people are in school from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just want to use one example. If a parent in a regular school district had 2 teenage sons, and those teenage sons got into fights or arguments with themselves, or if they got into arguments with their parents in the evenings, and because of those arguments, those parents stopped letting their children go to school, the schools would call up the family and say, why are Marcus and Kenny not coming to school? And if a parent said because they are disruptive in the evening, because they are argumentative in the evening, because they spit at us or curse at us, we're not letting them go to school. Well, the school principal would say, but when they come to school, that's not what they're doing. And as a parent, you need to get them to school. And if the parent did not do that, that school would call up Child Protective Services. And they would call Child Protective Services and say, please go to this house because those parents are not letting their young people come to school. And when you run a youth correctional facility, you are the parent. And if your practices are not allowing kids to come to school because of things that happen in the evening, then we need to be thinking like we are in the custodial care of these young people. It is our obligation to help them get to school during the day, particularly if the situations that they're getting into arguments about are not happening at school. We need to separate those out. The consequence of poor behavior in the evening cannot be, particularly for young people with mental health challenges and behavioral challenges, not going to school. So your colleague letter is a part of this and it's available to people, but we're going to kind of keep going. Okay, the next piece, try to go a little faster here, I apologize. Okay, I'm going to encourage you to go visit your schools if you don't. And what should you do? we'll get there a little early. Observe, what time do students really come into school? If school's supposed to start at 8:30, is everybody in between 8:25 and 8:35, or are some kids coming in at 8:25 and some 8:35 and some 8:45 and some 8:55? How does it feel like? What does it feel like when kids come in? Are the teachers outside their doors, or the principal outside welcoming? Is there maybe some music on that's making people like be, hey, like, let's get to school? What does the physical space look like? Is it welcoming? Are there posters up and quotations up and student artwork up, or is it dull and drab? These are all just real basic things. What to ask? What information is being shared before school starts? Do you know? Does the facility director or the daytime shift supervisor meet with the school principal every day beforehand and talk about, here's what happened last night, here's the 2 students who got in an argument last night, we really need to have some conversations with them before they come in? Does anybody have a list? Here's the 3 students who are going to court today. Has anybody had a conversation about, hey, who's, what's the status of medication? Are we really working on this to make sure everybody gets their medication before they come to school? All these things are just sort of like, there's these operational challenges that can get in the way. But if someone like in a leadership really starts to address them, huge changes can take place. We've been in facilities where every student who has like a medical call will not go to school, and they'll go sit in the medical triage space for the whole day waiting to get called until someone just asks the most basic question. Why don't students go to school and then you just pull them down to come to the nursing suite in pairs so they don't miss a lot of school? And sometimes the answers are just as basic, well, we've done it this way forever. But again, I want to encourage those of you in leadership to be asking those, to be finding this out. The only way you find this out, really, honestly, is by going to the school, observing the start of school, asking a series of questions, and sort of being there a couple times, like see how this all plays out. And all this will be available to everybody. Here's just a real quick, this is not technical, this is not edu-jargon, this is just available. If you want to do this, hey, take this piece of paper, print it out, and go to school tomorrow. Again, same thing, what time school's supposed to start? Is everybody there on time? Is everybody ready for school? Did kids get their medication? Have they had their breakfast? What's going on with those 4 or 5 students that supposedly aren't in school, or people going over to the dorms to talk with them and try to figure out if they can get them in? So again, there's some comments down here about school culture, and this is just sort of real stuff. Have fun with, don't get too bogged down in the details, and don't be afraid about the fact about, oh my gosh, I'm not an educator, I can't answer this stuff, because that's just not the case. Oops, sorry about that. Let's get back up here. So I'm encouraging you to get over there and get into school, okay? Next piece, I'm also going to say, hey, go into some classes. Again, whether it's your staff running the schools or whether it's a local school district, the way you find out whether schools are working for your students is to go into class. Many of you on this call have children. You have kids who've been through middle school, they're in high school. You don't have to be a trained anybody to go into class and have a basic notion. Is what's going on here makes sense here? Is the teacher engaged? Let's be really simplistic here. What does an engaged teacher look like? An engaged teacher is moving around the room, patting a young person on the back, encouraging someone, helping the student with a problem, asking those 2 students how they're doing. What does a non-engaged teacher look like? A non-engaged teacher sitting behind his or her desk doing his email. You can do this. You can do this even if you've never been in a school before. You can do this. You can decide what you can make a decision. You can discern this. Are the students engaged? Again, are they participating? Are they excited about their work? Is there some students working together at tables, or are they just working only on their own? Just go in there and look around at the walls. What do the walls tell you? Are they welcoming? Is there some student work up? Look at the dates of the student work. Is the student work on the board, real in time? Like, was this work that students did a week ago or a year ago? Look at the whiteboard or the smartboard or the chalkboard. Is there something that says what we're doing today? And again, is what it says we're doing today or 2 weeks ago or a month ago? So is there a punch or purpose? Is there an oomph? Is there an oomph to the class? That's a basic thing. Again, you don't have to be a real professional to know whether there's some oomph here. What does oomph look like? Oomph looks like I'm excited. We're working here. We're moving. We're getting up to the board. We're sitting down. We're asking questions. It's sort of like managed chaos. It's a good thing. That's punch. That's purpose. Is there any sort of positive behavior management stuff taking place? How is the teacher and the secure care staff, if you have secure care class in the room, are they communicating? Is there some interaction there? Are you paying secure care staff 8 hours a day to just totally sit in the corner and just merely wait for a fight to break out or not? Or are you paying your secure care staff to start to get trained and work with the school staff so they can maintain safety, but also be supportive in the classroom? Does the teacher encourage the secure care person to sort of get involved in the class? These are all just, you really, again, I want to keep saying the same thing. You can do this. You don't have to be a principal supervisor to do this stuff. I want to spend just a moment on the secure care staff question again, just to raise the question. Many of you in leadership pay secure care staff to be on duty during the school hours. My perspective, sort of 5-6 years into this and being into almost hundreds of schools and youth facilities, is that these are some of the most underutilized adults in the system. And we're spending lots and lots of money to have secure care staff on duty during the day with a real lack of clarity about what their role are. In many of your systems, in some of your systems, the secure care don't even go into the classrooms. They stay in the hallways or someplace else for 6-8 hours a day, and you pay them when they could be getting trained and be working with your teachers, and they could still have eyes on. They could still be available for security. They could still be available to move kids around, but also be really an asset to the school. From their professional development, this also can help them so much. They can get additional training. They could get additional certification. Their life can be much more interesting. So again, I want to encourage you as you do these visits to sort of ask the question, what's the role of the secure care custodial staff from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock? Are we spending money in a way that makes sense here to have all these adults involved? And if we are paying them to be on duty for this time, how do we get them to start working with the school? And how do we get the school to be working with them so that we can really, really double up and make the most of our time with young people? Again, just a little more on this, like how many kids are in the room? And when I say, how does it add up? If you go to 4 or 5 rooms for just 5 or 10 minutes each, and every class only has 5 or 6 kids, like how does that add up when you go ask how many kids are in the facility? Where are they all? And again, these questions will really help you, because what you might end up finding is everybody is doing the best they can and working hard. But why at 10 in the morning, again, are 4 kids in medical, 2 kids on the dorm because they didn't get breakfast, another kid someplace else, 3 kids in the behavior management pod, and you're left with 50% of your students in school when you have a full-time school and a full-time staff there to educate them. With everybody focused on 90% of the kids, 90% of the time in class, you can really change that. And again, significantly different outcome for a larger number of students. When you go into that classroom, again, if you're the agency director, I know it's going to potentially cause chaos, but you just sort of slip to the back. I'm just here to observe for 5 or 10 minutes. And then while you're doing that, just kneel down next to a young person. Hey, what are you working on, Kenny? How's class going for you, Marcus? Hey, Susie, what are you working on here? You'll be amazed by what you'll learn by just talking to young people. Hey, did you get a grade yesterday? Did you get a grade last week in this? How long have you been in the class? What subject is this? You'll learn so much by asking these questions that you'll be able to sort of have such a better conversation with your principals. Same thing, there's a quick visit tool that's available too if you want to here. And it's just a set of there's just the same questions kind of coming straight out of the bullet points here. Again, don't get bogged down into anybody saying to you, but that's not the teacher evaluation tool we use in this school district. That doesn't align with that. Hey, you're not trying to evaluate the teachers. You run this agency, you're the deputy director of this agency. This is a part of your program. I'm just doing a nice visit, going to sort of do a quick check-in. I'm not evaluating this teacher, but I am here to ask some good questions, just observe and take some notes. This is what you should be doing. Okay. Similarly, I'm going to encourage you, if you don't do it much, get over to the school and talk to the principal ahead of time about you want to just do a quick focus group with 10 kids at lunchtime, or ask in advance whether one of the classes can be shortened by 10 minutes, and you just want to get in there and talk to the students. Hey, how's school's going for you? What could be better about school? You really want to be asking some of these questions. Can students articulate? Can they say, do I get grades? Okay, what did you get on your last report card? Do you know how many credits you need to graduate? Ask them to raise their hand if they believe they're getting released in the next few months. And if they are, what are your plans? Do you know where you're going to be living? Do you know where you're going to be going to school? you're there, you'll know some more detailed questions, but all these things just give you some insight into the effectiveness of your school. Again, we're not going to do it right here. I don't think it's worth it, but there's a little focus group check-in here too if you want some help because you feel uncomfortable. Just get in there and ask some basic questions. How's the school going for you? Ask some more probing questions for students who are getting near transition. Okay, same thing. You don't have to have a PhD in special ed, and you don't have to do any of this stuff. You don't have to be certified in special ed to get a feel for whether your school is doing right by students with special needs. So again, I'm going to encourage you to the same old thing. Talk to your principal, talk to the director of special ed. You want to look at a couple IEP files. You might need to sign some piece of paper that says, you know, you're not going to be sharing these with other folks. But what do these IEP goals look like? Do they make any sense? Are they years and years old? Are they relevant at all to the lives of kids in your schools as you would come to know them? And then ask to meet with the one or two students and ask to meet with the students individually and just do your thing. Be comfortable and confident with them. How's school going for you? Hey, I've read over your IEP. Do you know what's in your IEP? Do you know why you have an IEP? Do you know what an IEP is? I see some goals here. What sort of goals have you established with your school or your special education coordinator about trying to help you meet these goals? You may or may not know, like you're going to ask some questions. If you struggle to read, do you get any tutoring help here? How does the school help you meet these goals? And if you have some specialized needs, do you feel like you're getting met here? Just a real open, transparent, nice conversation with a 16 or 17-year-old. And you just want to just be taking this in. Wow, did a kid have an IEP, and does your school say that they're meeting this kid's IEPs, but when you talk with the young people, they don't even know what an IEP is? Does the school have goals that just don't make any sense? Does the school say the student gets 3 hours of one-on-one reading to help them learn how to read, and the students say, no, I never get any tutoring? You don't know until you ask, I can tell you that. So lastly, got to keep moving here. I'm going to encourage you to find a way to meet with like your facility director and your school principal. How often do they meet? Do they have a regular agenda they go over? Are they addressing some of these things that I've been mentioning here? Do they address issues of attendance? Do they have some goals about 90% of the students all the time? Do they together work on issues of disruption and sort of operational coordination? Again, does the principal and your facility director do they understand what the December 2014 guidance talks about? Are their discipline practices coordinated? Is behavior management at the school and behavior management at the facility coordinated? Does it feel like one effort? Or are they two totally different languages? And then here again, don't shy away from things that seem problematic. I really want to encourage everybody to be prepared to take on a real leadership role with state superintendents of school districts. And then lastly, what can you do for some people here? Well, you can get them some wins. You might go to a school and you might hear people say over and over again, we can't get on the internet at all. We can't even use Khan Academy. We can't even use two really good programs that we really need for our students because the state office of technology security won't let us do it. And you got to win those for your people. We're going to get to that in just a couple minutes quickly, but there's some incredible schools and youth facilities around the country that have really thoughtful strategies around making technology and internet work for them. Kentucky, Wyoming, Oregon, Missouri, Nebraska, all up and down. You just never know. But none of this happened until somebody usually in leadership said, hey, I'm going to help you guys get some wins. The same things on the operations, logistics issues. Like, let's step back and get some wins here. What's some basic stuff? Does the medical nursing staff need to come in at 7 as compared to 8? And if they came in at 7 because we changed we made they come in at 7 and everybody gets medication with breakfast and we really follow up with it, would that make a big difference? Yes, let's get that done. Boom. The shift change happened at 2:15, but the school goes until 2:30. Well, that's kind of silly. Let's step back and talk about, can we move shift change 15, 20 minutes? Can we change the start of school so that we can have some alignment and get rid of some of these disruptions? And then follow up. That's the best I can tell you. I want to try to keep going here. I know that we're trying to cram a lot in, and what I see on my screen, I'm not seeing, I think the questions are going into Simone. I want to transition just very briefly. So that part was my attempt, good or bad, to be speaking to those of you. Again, you're an agency leadership, you're a facility director, you're a deputy director. What are some basic things you could do to try to get your arms around figuring out is school working, and how can I learn more about it, and how could I then ask good questions and sort of support and push on levers that might create change. I now want to just very quickly, I want to really keep this to 10 minutes so we can take questions or have a discussion. I now just want to sort of put out there, here's 6 or 7 what I'm going to call sort of elements or sort of pillars that I think help lead the way to quality schools. These are very similar to some of the pillars that are also put out also in December of 2014. The Department of Justice and Department of Education also put out a really thoughtful document that just sort of talks about like principles of quality education in youth facilities. These are a little different, but fairly similar. And a number of these come from our work, both at Maya Angelou and now at the Travis Hill Schools. So the first one I want to suggest is, just like a lot of other parts of your agency, really getting the right people into that school, into your schools is really critical. And again, I know you probably sit in 2 different camps. Some of you work for a juvenile justice agency and you have your own educational team. Some of you work for a juvenile justice agency and a school district runs it. Either way, we want really quality people who are mission driven in your classrooms. And the most important thing is, whether you're doing it or whether your school district is doing it, you need to get quality people. You need to support them, train them, provide them good training, but you need to hold them accountable. When adults don't teach kids in schools, it just perpetuates this ongoing cycle. And what we found at Maya was, early on, we got really people who wanted to be doing this work, but they couldn't quite make it happen. And after a couple of years, we got to the point where we had very little turnover because we had real buy-in around mission. But real buy-in around mission doesn't just mean, hey, I want to help kids who are in trouble. It also means, as a teacher, I'm going to work on my craft. I understand that to be successful in this school, I have to be able to teach 3 levels of math at one time. I'm prepared for that. I'm excited about it, and that's what I want to get good at. It's not that I want to teach 1 level of math and I want you to create a school that works for me so I can teach 1 level of math. That person cannot stay in your school. That person has to become someone who will teach 3 levels of math, or they have to leave. Second thing is culture. Culture is so incredibly critical in these spaces. And again, depending on where you are in sort of the ecosystem here, what's your role? Your role as a teacher, your role as a principal, your role as a director of an agency. These schools should be alive, and they should be colorful, and they should be friendly, and there should be things up on the walls, and everything that you would want in your child's middle or high school should be in these schools, and you should be expecting that, and you should be encouraging people to do that. You really need to celebrate student success. All those are young people who are actually in a youth facility that I'm showing you there right now, shockingly. School culture, you have to be able to work and develop positive behavioral incentive type programs. I want to encourage everybody to be really thinking about using restorative practices and moving your facilities away from punitive discipline. It's once you rely on and allow your staff to use punitive discipline in the school as the way to maintain control, you've ceded so much of the possibilities around what culture can really do for your students and for your staff and for the life of the agency. And the more you commit to, this is about relationships, this is about the really, really hard work at trauma, this is about the really hard work about mutual respect. That's how you slowly win these things. And that's how you create a school and a facility and an agency that is one where adults want to be and where kids thrive. So creating a really positive school culture is incredibly, incredibly critical. We do a lot of work with agencies to try to help the secure care staff and the teachers and the students all come together around projects that work for students. That could be the poetry initiative. It could be the mural projects that they've done in Utah. It can be, again, a school-wide contest that requires everybody to get on board, so all the students will be in the auditorium together doing something positive, as compared to all broken up into small groups with everybody saying, if we ever put them in the same place, it'll be a massive riot. It won't be if the adults get together and decide to make it a positive, proactive, pro-social place. It will become that, and then you just have to make smart decisions about some exceptions. School culture, again, I've said this before, you have to really, really try to help protect instructional time. have to really attack these policies that sometimes just get stuck for a long, long time, and mean we lose instructional time around disruption, etc. Curriculum is clearly a huge piece of this. What does that look like? Again, you're an agency director. David, what the heck? I don't build curriculum. I know you don't build curriculum, but what do you want to be seen, and what do you want to be talking to your principal about, and what do you want your principal to be talking to your teachers about? You want school to be relevant. You want it to be engaging. You want teachers who differentiate and can make a classroom work for 14-year-olds who read at the 10th grade level, and for 18-year-olds who read at the 3rd grade level. You want to talk about real issues. You want to talk about problems and challenges and things that are relevant. You don't want people who say, hey, we're just going to start on September 1 and go till June 30th, and whenever a kid comes in, they just get what they get. That's not how life works in a youth facility. These units have to be modular and have the capacity to engage young people when they come in, and you get engaged, you get caught up, you do some work, you build a project, you present your project, you get rewarded for working hard, you go to an award ceremony, you have a sense of accomplishment, you read your first book. That's how these things work, and that's how kids grow and change and develop. And you have to have a curriculum and an organizational structure to your school day that works like that. Again, curriculum and instruction here, a little more on this. Again, we've seen such a decline, thankfully, over the last 5 to 6 years as we've been doing this work, and as more and more people have really started to say we want to tackle education reform inside of facilities. It just isn't true. When people say I have kids at different levels and different classes, the only thing I can do is sort of pass out worksheets and go sit behind my desk. That just isn't true. You can help on this. You can help them get more technology. You can help train them. You can help support them. Students work in small teams. Students present in small teams. Students tutor each other. There's just an ongoing, it's just you have to keep pushing on this notion of we're going to move away from this idea that we hand out textbooks or we're going to hand out these packets. These last two pieces are really important, particularly as many states thankfully are raising the age. Many of the juvenile facilities are now having more kids who are 17, 18. Again, you can't have kids who've gotten their certifications, got their high school diploma or GED in your facilities, but they're just sitting around not doing anything all day. We'd be happy to talk with people about that more if they want to. But again, you can't let your school district providers off the hook. You run a juvenile justice agency. The local school district runs the school inside of your facility, and they say to you, once the kid has his high school diploma, we're not going to teach. We can't do anything. We're a K-12 provider. Again, you just want to ask them the most basic question. For the schools in the city, for the schools in the suburbs, don't students take AP classes? I know you offer dual credit classes for other students, and those are the exact same things that should be offered for the students in your facility. Almost all the school districts offer some sort of dual enrollment courses, offer AP or college level courses. And for students who finished, that's what they deserve in your facilities as well, whether your agency is running them or whether the local school district is running them. Schoolwide instructional tools is our fourth pillar. Again, this is a little bit in the minutia if you're an agency director, but too often in these schools, we see people just sort of compromise and say, hey, I'm just going to kind of show up and kind of make it happen and kind of do my best. That's not cutting it for our kids. They're behind. Almost all of them have experienced school failure. This is about, we build really terrific relationships, but we also hold ourselves as adults accountable. And we help students understand that there is a sense of urgency. You may not think it, but in this school today, there's a sense of urgency. We come into class, we turn that timer on, we have a 5-minute warm-up. Everybody gets their warm-up ticket. Two people go onto the whiteboard, they complete their warm-up ticket. We talk about it. We now do our mini lesson. We now break up into small teams. We now report out. We now do a presentation. We get our exit slip. We get a knock on the door. We have 3 minutes. Boom, next class. And that's how it has to happen because we cannot afford to waste time. Again, just kind of moving down this list, again, teachers need to want to and get trained to differentiate. You can't teach in a school in a youth facility and think, I'm only going to teach 9th grade algebra this period to young people who are all prepared to teach 9th grade algebra. That is not how it works in youth facilities. So you need teachers that can do more than that and you need to be supporting your schools in their capacity to offer teachers that. Transition, we probably should save for another time if we wanted to. There's so much work to be done here, but the most important thing is start thinking about that transition up front. As a school, as someone who's in agency leadership, again, test the waters on this, test the waters. Kids, look, get a list of kids that are 60 days out, get a list of kids that are 30 days out. What are we doing here? How are we working together on this? What can you do at the agency level? I see my timer going off. I just want to hit a couple quick things here, then I'll stop. Why as an agency are we, if we have a number of students who are, we're in a secure care facility that releases students once kids meet certain attainment items, why don't we push really hard to have a number of students released in late August, right before school starts? Why would we hold a bunch of them accidentally till September 15th or September 20th and then have 6 kids released once schools are already started, once everybody else is already in place? Did that last 2 weeks of holding them in your facility really change their capacity to be successful? No, you could have triaged that. You could have worked with your team and said, hey, let's get all these guys ready to leave on August 15th so they can transition to school more effectively. There's all sorts of like technical pieces of this that you and leadership can help make this work better. Embracing technology, again, we can come back to that if anybody wants to reach out to us. Using the internet, there's so many great tools now that are available to you to make technology help your schools be so much more engaging, so much more individualized, so much more relevant. You can do them safely, you can do them affordably. What you can't do and shouldn't do is have kids sit on computers all day long and suggest you're doing blended learning together, because that's just not good. And then lastly, again, same idea. These are difficult facilities to work in. Kids do come and go. Some traditional education sort of metrics don't tend to work. But having said that, there's schools, a lot of students are with you 90 days, 120 days, 9 months, 6 months. There's just basic data that you in leadership want to be encouraging your school and your teachers to look at, because it's going to help you think and change the way you perform and you meet your obligations to your students. With that, I got to stop because we got 8 minutes for questions.
Thank you, David. We appreciate you sharing the tremendous number of resources with the participants today. I'm Simone Gulf. I am the Project Director of the National Technical Assistance Center for the Education of Neglected and Delinquent Children and Youth, known as NDTAC, and I'm going to go through a few questions that have been submitted. One of the first questions, David, was you mentioned Google Forms for attendance. Have you had any concerns regarding IT security and kids' information being housed through Google Docs? Do you have any specific IT security requirements different from, say, a traditional school district?
We work with a lot of schools that have started to move totally towards like Google Classrooms and Google for Education, and Google has really good people that can work with schools and work with facilities to make this totally transparent and safe. That being said, just about anything that we're doing in Google Forms can also be done using some other, potentially proprietary software that's on some other student information system with some programming.
Thanks, David. We have another question that's come in. Is there a core set of data facility schools should be collecting in order to improve educational delivery practices? They'll give some outcome data, and that way that principal or the school administrator, facility administrator, or the administrator of the state agency would say, I see things improving here in the school. Any core set of data?
Again, I think we'd be happy to post some stuff to the website, and even Simone, you and I might even be able to do that jointly. But again, everybody, for students who are with you for significant periods of time, like we can't shy away from this. Even if it's not a perfect tool, we should be owning the fact that students who are with us for significant periods of time should show growth on some agreed to tool in English and math. Students who are with us for significant periods of time should be able to meet state standards. Like in Louisiana, you can't graduate high school unless you pass the end of course exam in algebra. We're pretty clear. Kids that are with us 6 months in our school in Louisiana, if they're in algebra, they should pass the test. And if they don't, we fail them. Credit accumulation is a data point that we suggest. How long are kids as a student with you? How much time would a student in a regular school, how much credit would they earn during that time? Are students earning the approximate amount of credit that their incarcerated peers are earning? Yes or no? These are some basic data points. You couple them with attendance data, discipline data, and you can have a pretty good set of data to look at, even if less than perfect.
Thanks, David. Those are great suggestions. Are there any states or counties who have a good model for training involving training as to how to involve the direct care staff in being an active part of their school?
Missouri does a terrific job of this. In part, Missouri almost doesn't even distinguish between the two, and that's been helpful to them. They've now really increased their capacity to train their teacher instructors, but there's a real there isn't an artificial distinction in the Missouri system. We've worked with a number of other agencies where we've just really tried to bring people together and, again, find some common agreed to outcomes for young people and find some projects that they want to work on together. And you'd be amazed that if you get all the adults in the room focused on what kids can accomplish, that you can kind of break through some of these barriers. Again, I think we'd be better off if I think we could post some of that. Again, I could work with you, Simone, on that. We probably collectively could come up with some examples and some contacts in 5 to 10 other either county or state jurisdictions where there'd be people I think would feel comfortable that they've been making good strides in that area.
Okay. And David, when you mentioned earlier about the instructional staff and the frontline staff working jointly in the classroom, were you referencing discipline or instruction or both?
Simone, we broke up just for a moment there, so I apologize. Can you do that one more time? I apologize, everybody.
Sure. This is sort of a second part to that question.
Yes.
Are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So as you were referencing that the frontline staff and the educational staff working jointly in the classroom, were you referencing working jointly around behavior management, discipline, and instruction, or all of the above, or just one area such as management?
I think both. I think we can be realistic here. I think, there may be secure care staff who say, again, I wasn't hired to be a teacher. I'm not a qualified teacher. But nonetheless, the vast majority of secure care staff can be terrific at sitting at a table with young people while they're reading a book and have a book in their hand and be reading along with them. Many of the secure care staff, again, could be while students are working on a social studies assignment, they could be helping them with that assignment. I don't think we want to suggest that people need to get into a space where they're totally not comfortable, but I think a lot of our secure care staff has a lot more talents than we think about. Many of them also have a lot of other creative talents which we could utilize in other ways. I think it's more typical to think about having them work together around clear, aligned behavior management strategies, and I think that's really critical. But I think we should not only limit it to that. I think we should also say, hey, how do we make this classroom culture work? We have 3 adults in the room. One's a lead instructor. One does a little bit more around safety and security. So let's work together to make the classroom culture and the instructional strategies more robust.
Great. I think we have time for just one more. One of the issues you mentioned a little earlier was credit coursework following kids from facility to facility. Is there an online course provider that is maybe utilized more than others? Any recommendation as to a course provider?
I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly. I try to shy away from direct recommendations of online curriculum providers. There are a number of them out there. They all have strengths and weaknesses. And again, I'd be happy to either on my own or again with someone like you, Simone, help people sort of say, hey, here's 5 or 6 sort of online instructional curricula. What are some strengths and weaknesses of them? But none of them are perfect. None of them are a substitute for quality teaching and learning. But again, some of them are more flexible and some of them allow you to, for example, to insert your own curriculum and your own projects into them, which make them have a lot more capacity to be robust, engaging curricular tools as compared to straight online ones. But there's 5 or 6 providers I'd be happy to share with, again, either post them to the website or otherwise.
Okay, sounds great. Listen, David, thanks so much for the presentation and also responding to these questions. That was very, very helpful, I'm sure, to our participants. I turn things over to Peter or Jonah.
Yeah, this is Peter. I was just going to, two things. One is say thank you to David for sharing. I'm sitting in a room with some of our educational leadership, and the immediate feedback here is that your presentation was 100% on point. Real nice job, David. The second thing is that on Monday, April 2nd, we're going to hold our next call. It's going to be shaped around behavioral strategies. We'll get some information out ahead of time so that you can figure out whether or not you need to be on that webinar. And I want to thank everybody for signing on, and I hope that you take some of David's tips back to the ranch and work on them.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks, David.